So yesterday, I spoke to the voice of the Knoxville Raceway from 1981 until 1998. So it was a bit of a Back to the Future kind of deal. I was just missing the DeLorean, speaking to the wonderful Jack Herway. And would it be unfair of me to say that I'm now talking to his apprentice, Tony Bokhoven?
It's absolutely right. Absolutely right. So listening to you guys talk last night, there were a couple times where I had goosebumps on my arms listening to, his stories and the things that, were really important to him, back in the day. And when we were down sitting in the grandstands and his daughters used to sit by me, the part he left out, Wade, was that I was the best looking prom date his daughter Melinda ever had.
He dodged a bullet there. Far out. Wow, it could have been his son-in-law. Wow. Hey, you're wearing. We're both rocking the orange.
Yeah.
This is the 2015 Knoxville Nationals shirt. But you and I actually worked together way before then, and you dragged out a really cool old photo. Well, a cool old photo from Oski. Now, what year would that have been? Was that 94, 95, around there?
It would have been, 94 or 95, somewhere in there. You want to see it?
Yeah, absolutely. I reckon that would be 95 because Kenny was in his own car then. I think I'm rolling the old mouse shirt. Wow. The mullet and the Kenny Jacobs shirt, the 6 car.
Couple young fellows right there.
Yeah.
I think that was the first time you and I ever worked together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. What a race that is. So you have an incredible wall and I have a door. I brought my favorite helmet. I brought my Troy Jordan helmet. This was given to me by a friend of mine who races midgets down in Melbourne, and he did this custom helmet. He's a big musician. He's a great drummer. He's got Hendrix on the side there. But as you know, Tony, I'm a little bit partial to these guys.
Kid.
We did a shoot with his midget and a really cool old muscle car, and he gave me this helmet, which I was like,
yeah.
I was thinking before, I just tweeted before, that the whole toilet paper drastic situation right now, when you're getting down to your last square, it's a little bit like down to your last tear off. Do you rip it, Tony? Do you just pop the visor, or you?
The difference would be the drivers probably would wipe it on there, smear it around a little bit, and you wouldn't do that if you ran out of toilet paper. You speak of helmets. And my hero, my racing hero, is Rocky Hodges.
Yeah.
He was the 1984 track champion at Knoxville, and probably a lot of people, most notably, would remember him racing Leonard McCarl's car, the 7X. Then he drove and was successful on the All-Stars in Junior Holbrook, Junior and Janet's car, the 8H. But when I was, in my childhood, he drove the 23S, the McBride and Schaff car.
Oh.
And so he called me up one day, and he said, "Hey, you meet me in Des Moines." And this was the helmet that he wore when he drove the McBride and Schaff car. And I know how you feel about Hod and some of those guys, but when your hero writes you a note and gives you one of his helmets, one of the coolest things ever for me. It's like, okay, I could be done now. I've got his helmet. I'm done.
See, I regard Frankie Kerr as the McBride and Schaff 23S. Like for me, when he ran the All-Stars in that car and ran a few USAC non-wing races as well. And you know what I love about that, Tony, is that iconic livery era. You had the U2 United Express Lines car, of Kevin Huntley. You had Frankie Kerr. You had Kenny and Dean Jacobs. You had all those incredible, all-star competitors. 24 years coming up on this deal consecutively for you at Knoxville.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that, I'm 47, so nearly half my life, I've been at Knoxville on Saturday night. And, when I first started, I didn't set out as a kid to be an announcer. I set out to be a race car driver. That's what I wanted. And obviously I learned quickly through go-karting, and I got some pictures here I'll show in a little bit, but I figured out pretty quickly that I better figure out a better way to be involved in racing, because driving wasn't my sweet spot.
But even though you might concede that, this might frighten the ladies or it might turn them on. You need to do the reveal here, because you are the only hobby stock driver I've ever known who has his own shirt.
Right here, boys and girls.
Wow. Don't go too low. Look at that. Wow.
Yeah.
What was the car?
That was a 84 Chevrolet Monte Carlo. This was my second one. My first car was blue and yellow, but I don't know if you can see that, but that was my rig.
Look at that open trailer. Best way to advertise.
Had a big toolbox on the front and a tire rack up on the top. But it was so much fun. I mean, I was not good by any stretch of the imagination, but I had a lot of fun.
And the other thing too that's cool about that, Tony, is you have the perspective of a driver as well. And that's, as an announcer, that's really important. And even not so much even, he should be up on that line, but understanding the claustrophobia of that environment. Like in particularly now, like every now and again, you get to do it too. Someone will say to me, "You want to come and drive my midget on practice night? You want to drive my sprint car?" And I never knock it back, because you get that. They can't look this way. They can't look that way. It's one dimension. It's not 3-dimension. So it's a good thing as an announcer to remember that stuff.
Yeah, I think for me, it helps me when you see a car go up over the cushion, right? And the guy gets all sideways and stuff. And you're like, from a fan, if you don't know what that's like, and the announcer doesn't describe it to you, you're like, what's going on? And so for me to have been through some of that, I think probably helped, especially early in my career when, I was trying to establish myself as an announcer. It was at Knoxville anyway, it was important to be knowledgeable, right? Because the fans are educated and they understand it. And so, I think you're spot on. It's helped for sure. It's helped me understand the cars, and, when I see something on the racetrack, I can see what's going on. And I think that just makes it better.
It was amazing for me. I'd always recalled that one race that I called at Knoxville in '92, that Outlaws race. And the story was that I was basically, Steve and Sammy were in the same heat. Sammy was in the TMC car. Steve was in the Valvoline car. And they were rolling around under caution. And I said, I don't like to say controversial things or incite the crowd, Tony, but I said, in Australia, we just call Steve Kins a sir. And, well, the crowd lit up, and there's a couple of Swindell fans over to the left, and they booed me. Because it was out, like Jack said, we're out in the crowd, so there was no protection. And I said, "Oh no, I've upset the Swindell fans. I guess that makes 6 people." Well, the grandstand just lit up, and I looked over at these people. I thought, God, I hope they take this the right way. And Jack leaned over to me, and I shouldn't say this, but Jack said, "I have always wanted to say that." He said that off the mic, and when I finished, Tony, the Swindell fans said, come on over. They said, "You can be the 7th Swindell fan." And that's the thing I've always loved about Americans. They don't take each other too seriously, Tony. American race fans are like, "I'm just here for a good time. Let's have some fun." And they don't take themselves too seriously.
Yeah, they want to see a good race. They want to have a few beers, have a good time. I think you're spot on. Yeah.
So, mate, your wall looks phenomenal, and you showed me a couple of photos that are important to you. You want to show me a couple that are really, proud moments you're proud of?
Yeah. So the wall behind me, and which is where your photo was, is a wall full of mostly, almost all people that I've either announced with or broadcast TV with. So it's as announcers, we don't get to collect trophies, right? So our memories have to come in another way. And for me, it was, taking some photos with some of these people that I once announced with or whatever. But, I'll start up here, and I hope you can see it. So there's Jack Miller and I.
Holy cow!
We were at the Devil's Bowl. If you've heard the stories of, like, the lights mysteriously going out at the Devil's Bowl, this was one of those nights where the lights went out, not a reason for it, but the joke was always Landy decided that he hadn't sold enough concessions, so the lights would go out, so they'd sell more concessions. But then that one's really important. This one right here, I hope you can see it. That's me and Jack Herway when I started.
Yep.
We're actually announcing on that same place that you described outside. This one here, me and a couple guys that at one time or another could get around the racetrack pretty well.
Yeah.
Donnie and Steve.
Whatever happened to them? Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I hope we can talk about him in a little bit, but there's Tim Trier and I. That was during his inductions into the Knoxville Raceway Hall of Fame.
If you just pull that back a little bit, Tone, and it's a little bit dark, but I just want to try and work out a way that we can.
I got another one over here. I got another one to show you.
Good man.
This one's probably better. There you go.
Just come back a smidgen on that. It's a little bit blurry, but so was he the guy that did the Showtime in the Valley, or it's Race Time in the Valley? Was Tim the guy that coined that?
Yeah, Race Time in the Valley. He's got the wick turned up and the kite string out.
Yeah.
Some of those, yeah. This one here, Wade, that's my first time doing a television broadcast. That was ESPN at the Chili Bowl.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool. This one here, we laughed about this one, but that's, let's see here.
Let's see if you can pull these off the wall and put it in front of you, mate, because what's happening is it's slightly blurry, and I don't want people to lose the – that's what I love about recording with no edit, is that we'll just do it like this. But if you can grab some of those, because it was slightly blurry, and I want that to be the best effect.
Yeah, no worries. So this one here.
Yeah, you're blurry more than normally when I'm drunk. Now, that looks like you and Daveargabright. I can basically see that.
That's the first time I met Daveargabright at we were in the media room at the Chili Bowl, and I had just been talking about him, and someone said, hey, well, right there's Daveargabright if you want to meet him. And so I went over, and as you can see, I'm stiff as a board in that picture because I was so nervous that it's like, holy cow, it's Daveargabright. It's the Mr. Rogers of racing.
You mean your posture when you say that, stiff as a board, right?
But, so it's those kind of things for me, Wade. Like I said, we as announcers don't get to collect trophies. And so, I try to capture some of those moments so that, someday when I'm done, I can look back at that wall and think, man, I got to work with some badass announcers, and we called some of the best racing ever, So that's kind of, for me, that's what this wall really resembles. And every year I try to add 2 or 3. There's a picture of Justin Zock and I up there, and Blake Anderson, and it's pretty cool.
Now, you seem a little bit blurry to me, but I'm only on the coffee. I've got my Oranger Boys Racing mug here, but you're the one that's on the bourbon, so it should be the other way around. Can you see that? Is it it's still a little bit blurry, but I just want to make sure that you get the best of it. Slightly. We'll keep going. When you talk about moments that you can cherish forever, mate, calling the last lap of Jason Johnson's Knoxville Nationals life, like, wow, mate, doesn't get much bigger than that.
Wade, it's it's one of those things that as an announcer, you always hope you get to call the best race of the night.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was more about the fact that holy shit, someone's gonna beat Donnie Schatz tonight. Yeah. And he had to work for it, and Donnie didn't give it to him, and it wasn't some fluke that that happened, and so you and I have talked about this before. We're fans, right? Yeah. We're fans of this stuff, and so when he's coming through the high side of turns 3 and 4, the first thing I'm thinking to myself is, God, I hope Johnny shuts up so I can call this coming off of turn 4, and it worked out. He got to the end of his call. I picked it up, and I was jumping up and down in the suite as I was calling them coming across there, and now after everything that's happened, and I often think about Jax and hope that man, you didn't get to grow up with your daddy, but you're going to have a lot of really cool memories to look at one day, and to be a part of those memories. It's not about me, but just the fact that that's going to be a special time. Oh. And I'm glad that I got to call it. And, selfishly, I would say no one would have called it better. Right. So, badass. Yeah.
Well, it makes sense, Tony, that the voice of the Knoxville Raceway calls the voice is the same for the Knoxville Nationals win. And when you think back to the other ones that you've called the one-off winners, some guy called Craig Kinzer, and, people along those lines as well, that Tim Schaefer, the Steel City Outlaw, to have done that, and to have called Greg Hodnett's last A-main, success at Knoxville Raceway as well. And so you can go right back through that stuff and go, for us, it's the next mountain you climb. It's like you get up, you call another race, call another race. But along the way, there are Mount Everests in there.
Yeah. Colin, at the late model nationals, when Brian Burkhofer passed Scott Bloomquist on the top of 3 and 4 coming for the checkers, nobody coming off of turn 2, all the Bloomquist fans had their beer in the air. They were cheering like crazy. And going down the back straightaway, all of a sudden, Burkhofer gets this big run, and I mean never lifts going into 3. And you see the left front of that car come up in the air, and it's like, holy shit, he's going to beat him. And he got this big run off the top of turn 4, and so that was fun getting to call that. And so there is no one luckier in the what will be 60-year history of that racetrack than me. Getting to call some of the biggest races in the sport. And I would never have told Cappy this, God rest his soul, but I'd have done it for free.
Kendra might be watching this.
Yeah.
Right?
That was then, Wade.
Funny you called them late models then, Tony, because I distinctly recall you calling them Ubers. Right?
Some of them may be watching, Wade.
Late models. We both know that Krug is a late model guy. You and Mike Roberts must have had a long friendship as well. I think it's important to mention Mike, who I met, all those years ago as well, and has always welcomed me into that role, down on the floor and always just selflessly, allowed me to share in what he does. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, Mike, I think this will be 22 or 23 years for him, something like that. And Mike was like me too. I helped Archie Ergenbright on his sprint car, a 360 car, back in the day before I started announcing. And Mike did the same thing. He worked on a car. He was a part owner of a car. And so we both have a long history there. But yeah, Mike and I we've seen the best of times at Knoxville. We've seen the worst of times in our sport. But Mike probably doesn't get enough credit for the passion that he has for racing at Knoxville.
I like his podcast he's doing now, his video cast he's doing, and also the Why Knoxville series that he's working on as well. So, he's got an incredible capacity for knowledge and for information on that stuff too.
Yeah, I think what he prides himself in is when he's in the work area, he's able to talk about what's going on because he understands the mechanic side of the racing. So that's kind of his strong suit. We joke he had to come upstairs and announce in the booth one night and hated it. Yeah. That's not his thing. He wants to be down in the mud, getting it on cars. Yeah.
Now, because of the lack of clarity on our screen at the moment, it's turned into a little bit of a podcast, but I want you to show me as best you can the magnets that Jack was talking about, because I don't want to forget this. And it blows my mind a bit that was your live scoring situation. Now it's better. It seems to be clearer now. That's great.
So as Jack talked about, we used to go around the pits, and at the beginning of the night, we would have these on a big board, actually on this board. They would have them all on there, and we would put them in numerical order. We would start out with them all upside down, and as we checked them off, we would turn them upside right. So when we got upstairs, we knew who was here and who wasn't. And it was driver's name, car owner, chassis, engine, sponsors. And then, so what would happen is, so if this was the lineup, which, by the way, for the Aussies in the room, there's
that'd be the Maury Williams. Yep.
And so what we would do is, as the green flag waved, I would stand in front of Jack. And if Pete got out front, I would put him there. And then this guy right underneath of him, and so on and so forth. And as the race went each lap, we would just adjust them on here so that every lap we had the correct running order. And then at the end of the race, we had the finish. There it was, And so I've probably got 3,000 of these. I was given all of them from Jack when he retired, and Dennis Wilson gave me all of his. And so my plan is, for example, here is all of the 2003 410 cars. And so my plan is, when I'm done announcing finally, I'm going to give all of those to the National Sprint Car Hall of Fame and hope that they do something with it.
You were like my race pass of the 90s.
Exactly.
You were ahead of your time, Tony.
Except I didn't get to charge $25 a month for them.
Yeah. Wow. Do you still love it as much as you ever did, Tony?
Yeah, I do. I love it a lot, and I love it probably more today just because I've gotten to know people better than I did, back in the day. And I'm, and I'm sure you've experienced this. Sometimes you get accused of being a homer for this driver or that driver or whatever, and it's not about that, because at the end of the day, I really don't care who wins. I want it to be a good race and a safe race, but meeting some of the drivers, and getting to know them on a personal level. How many people can say that their friend Terry McCarl let them drive his car at Oskaloosa?
Yeah.
So I got to do that one time, and
Cool.
that's what I love about it, Wade, is meeting these drivers, and you've said this before too. It's about telling the story of their family, right, and getting to know them better. And I think what's helped me over the years is I've been really lucky to get to go do some TV stuff. And I won't ever forget this. My very first television broadcast was live at the Knoxville Nationals in would have been 99 or 2000 on TNN. And a guy by the name of Rick Miner was the producer. He's one of these big, burly guys, had a big cigar he chewed on, and big rough voice. And, he was kind of giving me the business, because the way I got that job was I had said to someone that I was pretty sure I could do just as good or better as any of the guys they were going to bring. And so I got a chance. Well, pre-race meeting, they wanted to get an interview with Sammy. And they're like, well, he won't do it. He'll never do it. And I'm like, no, he'll do it. I'll get it. And they're like, you won't get it. You won't get it. Just forget it. So first thing we did in the open of the show is I went and did my open by Sammy's car. And I walked right over to him, and we did this interview. And, Sammy is a wonderful guy. He's super intense. And to me, Wade, there's nothing cooler than when a driver calls you by name.
Yeah.
Right. And,
Yep.
And he called me by name in this interview. And after the show was over, everybody on the broadcast crew couldn't believe that I got an interview with Sammy Swindell. And I attribute that to the fact that I got to know him as a person. And there wasn't this fear of, okay, this guy that I don't know is going to stick this microphone in my face. What's he going to ask me? So that's why it's important.
It's interesting that you bring up the term super intense, because, Tony, you're a lot like that on race day. I think if people knew you, when you're hanging out in your motorhome or when you're mowing the lawns, great motorsport moment there for me. You're a very gregarious, very laid-back cat. In the heat of the battle, I'll call it, when you're calling up there, you get pretty intense. And I don't mean just excited. You're pretty fierce in what you do. Is that a fair call?
It's very fair. I think you put that nicer than most people would, because I take it very seriously. I have a responsibility as an announcer to entertain the fans, but I also have a responsibility to the drivers to make sure that the sponsors that give them $50,000 or $5,000 or $5 go away with a good experience. And so, as you've experienced, unfortunately, a time or two, I get it in my mind how I think it needs to go off, and if it doesn't happen that way, I don't like that very well. And it's unfortunate, and I wish I could change that about me. But at this point in my career, it's kind of you get what you get, with me. And it's not a personal thing. It's more about I want our announcing, I want our TV broadcast to be absolutely the best they can.
It's probably one moment that sticks out in my mind where I just failed to understand the seriousness of what was going on in the role that I play, which is more of the, I guess, the rodeo clown of Knoxville. And I'm okay with wearing that. That's what I'm brought into the show to do, is to provide some levity in things. And the Kevin Swindell incident, I had really no idea of the seriousness of that accident. And I remember trying to say to you guys, can I get the crowd in the backstretch going? Can I get some stuff? Can I get, and not having any, and I remember you saying to me, Wade, we just got to be quiet right now. Because no one had physically said this is a lot more serious than we realize. So even though we're in the inside or the inner sanctum of it all, sometimes people don't have a grip on the seriousness of the role at hand either,
No, that's right. And, we kind of have a rule that if the red flag comes out, we don't do anything until we get an all clear from the safety crew.
Yeah.
I was thinking about last night the severity of some of the accidents, and in my head I came up with five fatalities that I've announced there, and then I thought about Kevin's deal a little bit last night, and for me it's some people chastise me because I don't do anything when the situation's tense like that, but for me it's more about we have to be really respectful.
Yeah, respect the car. Yep.
And I would never want a driver to hear us, yucking it up and having a good time and think, oh, they don't give a shit about me, and so yeah, it gets really tense. And then, when things get bad, like Kevin's deal, an example, that happens right in front of the fans. They see what's going on. And then somehow as an announcer, you have to make that okay, or not necessarily okay, but you have to make it in such a way that, okay, we're going to race the rest of the night. We're going to go on, and so you have to turn yourself on. You have to get yourself up on the gas, right?
Yeah.
Because, here your friend is carted off on a cart and you're uncertain how severe it is, but it's bad.
Yeah.
So that's the downside to what we do. That, to me, that's the equivalent of starting on the front of the Knoxville Nationals and blowing that Gertie up on the green flag drop.
I think that's where in adversity too is where you learn to have respect for people. I have enormous respect for Daveargabright because of a moment when he just smashed everybody that night at the Nationals, and he was like on a tear and he had them covered, was looking for that clean sweep, and he blew the motor while he was leading.
Yeah.
And at the end, everyone was doing the big euphoric thing with the winner, and I went down and said, Dave, because I'll never walk straight up. I'll always have the mic off and I'll go, can we talk? I'll just signal, can we talk? And Dave spoke to me and did a really amazing, humble, gracious interview. And from that moment, I've always had enormous, not just for a racer, but, for him taking that moment in a utter devastation, that's where I learnt my respect for David,
Yeah, for sure. And, that's the other day there was a live chat with Linton. Port Royal did a live thing. And somebody was on there giving him the business. And I thought of a couple times when I had interviewed Linton after he had crashed.
Yeah.
And, the first time, which was when Linton first came here, he got crashed and it was a bad deal. And, it was a bad interview. Like, it was one of those that I went into the interview and said to him, my first thing was, before we went on the air, please don't swear, right? Because they won't use it. And he was so angry and just indigenous about what had happened. And then years later, I interviewed Linton after a crash, and way different, So I think drivers, seasoned drivers like Linton, like Daveargabright, they figure it out, right? It's like, look, I have a responsibility not to just myself and my team, but my sponsors, my family, my fans. So it's definitely the difference between rookies and seasoned drivers.
And the beauty is that Sammy's never worked that out or never cared, because we still need bad guys, Tony, right? We need heroes and villains, and they love Sammy. And I wrote an article on my Facey a couple of years ago about the need for Sammy. And I've always been Jack, like that's always been my guy, who's never pissed anybody off in his life other than maybe someone over on his way to the front. But Sammy, it's so important to have characters still, because we don't need everyone to be vanilla. You still need the Bushes in NASCAR. You still got to have someone that gets you a bit hackled up, But I think, Tony, the thing that pisses me off the most is how people boo Donnie, and for no other reason that he's the best. If he was a dirty driver, if he was cheating, all those things, he just gets booed because he's so damn good. And you saw it with Kinzer because you got to call so many of his Nationals wins.
Right.
It still doesn't make it right. As a sport fan, I don't mind booing an opposition team, like a sporting team. Everyone hates Collingwood in the AFL down here, yet it's my son's favourite team. But when you go one-on-one with that, I find it really hard to accept that people boo Donnie, and that's just my thing,
Yeah, go back to Sammy a little bit. The sport needs a villain, to your point. And over the years, Sammy has been okay with being that guy because he went out there and just beat him, every night, but a lot of nights. And then you talk about booing Steve and Sammy, and I'm like you. I don't mind people booing them. It's the rest of the stuff that comes along with it that probably rubs me a little bit in the wrong direction. It's like you got to understand what these guys just did. They went out there for 30 laps, went into the corner at 140 miles an hour, 6 inches away from somebody that may want to just drive right through them. And so you have to have some respect for a driver, whether you like them or not. You have to have some respect for them because of what they do. And so, yeah, I think when you've been around like you and I have, that's probably the hardest part for me sometimes on the microphone is there's nights where I want to tell them off. Yeah. I want to tell fans, the business, here it is, but you can't do that, right? So.
No, and I mean, I think last year in particular with Donnie, knowing that Danny was so unwell, that his dad, has been battling with cancer, and I thought it would have been just nice for the fans to let Donnie catch a little bit of a break so that his dad could hear people celebrate the greatest that there's been since the King. But that sporting rivalry, hockey. You announced hockey.
Yeah. So the funny thing about Iowa is we have no professional teams, right? No NFL team, no NBA team. But we have a USHL hockey team in Des Moines, and it's comprised of high school kids. And they play for scholarships. They don't get paid. They play for scholarships. And so I was going, and Wally and Bev Price, Wally, the pace truck driver, he and Bev have went for years. And so I started out just going and sitting by them and got to know the announcer there and got to know some other people on the team. And they asked me one time, hey, would you like to come and announce? And because Maxwell was going to be gone. And so I'm like, I'm a guy that knows zero about stick and ball sports, right? Yeah. But I'm like, what could possibly go wrong? So I went, and I enjoyed it. I learned about it and had a really good time. Got to know some of the players on the team, and that was a fun part of it because again, these are high school kids that are thousands of miles away from home, living in the basement of somebody else's house. But it was just fun because they'd fight like you stole from them, and it was just great.
One of my favorite TV shows was Family Ties. I was kind of still a little bit in love with Mrs. Keaton. And Skip Handelman, remember Skip, the neighbor, the nerdy neighbor that would come by? I saw him do some stand-up once, and someone said he asked a hockey player, why do you play hockey? And the guy goes, because, like, if you break your leg, the ice is, like, right there. Now, I'm sorry, Johnny Gibson. I'm sorry if you're even watching this. I know that he's a massive Penguins fan and hockey is his life. What do you do away from racing, Tony?
I don't.
Not at the moment. It's different.
Last year I bought a go-kart. So when I was a kid in high school, I raced go-karts. Right there.
Yeah.
And then I went, into the hobby stock and stuff. And then during my hobby stock times, I built a cage cart.
Wow.
And we ran
that bad boy. The toolbox is bigger.
Yeah. These ran dual 2 100cc Yamaha engines on it. But anyway, so then I started announcing at Knoxville and kind of quit, right? And so last year, Josh Holt from My Race Pass, Ross Van Eck from My Race Pass, Mike Long, who was with EMI at the time, they all race go-karts. Yeah. And it's called the Margay Ignite series. And so they kind of talked me into doing it. So I bought a cart and bought a trailer and bought all the stuff to go along with it and went out and got a sponsor. And so I raced like 7 times last year. So I do that. Outside of that, Wade, it's all racing all the time. I have another job, like a real job that I do during the week, but my evenings are spent, watching races, online or going to a race at Oskaloosa or, an IMCA race somewhere. And the unfortunate thing for me is I don't have a lot of wide interest. I do like to hunt and fish. But outside of that, that's about me in a bag.
You glossed over a little bit your karting stuff. I wanted to ask you about the coolest track you've ever raced at. I reckon I know the answer, and it wasn't on dirt.
The Indianapolis Motor Speedway last year. Yeah. Wade, the coolest thing ever. So at Indy, where they built the dirt track in turn 3, there's a road course inside the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and they made part of it a course for us. So we qualified the first 2 days, and then on Friday night, after qualifying was over, so there's like 600 carts. So they put us in groups of 50 to 100, and they put a pace car in front of us, and they let us take one lap on the Speedway, on the big track. And it gives me goosebumps just talking about it right now. But I'm telling you, there's so many things I didn't realize about that track until I actually got on it. But, you know, like, you don't realize when you're watching it on TV that the front straightaway in turn 1 is banked like this. Like, it's really banked. And the track is very porous. And things like when you go across the yard of bricks, it's like, dunk, you know, it's not smooth, you know. And so, but, you know, you come down the front straightaway, right? And all of a sudden, the pagoda's right here up to your left in this big old grandstands, and you hit the yard of bricks, and you're like, wow, I'm driving a race-powered kart on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Tony, who is the most famous or the most person that affected you that you've interviewed that's non-racing? Have you had a bucket list moment where you've interviewed someone or you've met someone that was your hero that was non-racing related?
Well, I mean, you know, I was a big Jeff Gordon fan, although that's racing related. Non-racing related, and wait, I couldn't come up with one because, like I told you, I didn't get into announcing because I had been a journalism major in school or anything like that. It happened on accident, and you know, if not for Jack Herway and me and him giving each other a hard time one night, this would have never happened. And so all the people that I've interviewed have been through racing in one form or another. You know, I got to do some torque off-road trucks on television. I did 2 seasons of that for CBS, which was super cool. And you know, Ricky Johnson, the motocross star, what a cool guy. Yeah, you know, what a cool guy. And we text every now and then still, you know, and
nice.
Yeah, right. Well,
nice.
And you know, Brad Doty, whom we both love dearly, and I tell him this all the time. When Brad Doty calls me, I lose my breath for a second because it's like, holy shit, Brad Doty's calling me, right? You know, because when I grew up as a kid, he was the outlaw. You know, he had the outlaw guy on his car, the Coors Light car, and I mean, so to me, getting to interview the pure legends of the sport of sprint car racing and motocross and off-road trucks and that kind of stuff, drag racing. I got to interview Alexis DeJoria one time, which was super, super cool. I ran into her. We were doing a torque broadcast at Sturgis, and we were doing this like sights and sounds thing, and all of a sudden I see over in the crowd Alexis DeJoria. So I'm like, come on. And we went just barreled into the crowd and interviewed her. It was so cool. But yeah, pretty awesome stuff like that.
Where did looking come from?
Tim Trier. I would tell you that I have very few original lines of my own. The Jim Dandy thing was something I kind of came up with. I threw the keys on the counter and checked out. That was one that I came up with. But you know, when I started, my dad was a drag racer when I was a kid. Yeah. And in fact, here's another little fun nugget for you. That's me.
Oh, wow.
As a just over toddler age in my dad's drag car. Wow. But so when he quit drag racing, then we started going to Knoxville, and you know, it's I just totally went blank right there. What did you ask me?
You know, the original liners, you know, like the Jim Dandy.
Yeah. So listening to Tim, you know, Tim used to do this thing where right after the national anthem, everybody was still standing. And his thing was everybody needed to stand until he asked, race fans, what time is it? And everybody would yell, it's showtime, you know? And so, but he had all kinds of one-liners like that. And so, you know, I had such a great deal of respect for Tim, and I got to announce with him for a few years later after he had quit and then came back to the track. So, and I'm proud of that. You know, I feel like that's a form of flattery, and it's my respect for him. It allows his legacy to live on a little bit, because when people say something about that, it's like, no, it wasn't mine. That was Tim Trier's, or Herway used to say that, or something like that, you know. And but yeah, that's a lot of cool one-liners from Tim.
And I think Jack and I talked about this briefly yesterday, Tony, that it's a privilege to do what we do. You know, there's not only just because of the ego of being able to say something in the moment that you hope people retain or that adds to the experience, but the idea of being able to meet and interview people and have the excuse to talk to your heroes is something that people like you and I, you know, we should never take for granted.
Oh yeah, for sure. You know, it's you know, guys like Steve Kinzer, right? Getting to interview the greatest sprint car driver of all times, or, you know, I'm a huge drag racing fan, so, you know, if I had to tell you, you know, what are some bucket list items, that would probably be one of those things for me, because I have such a great amount of respect for guys that can go 330 miles an hour and in, you know, just a couple of seconds or 3 seconds. I'm just way impressed by that kind of stuff. So those guys they're my football icons. I don't know anything about football, but, you know, they're my Joe Montana or my, you know, Tom Elway or somebody like that, you know.
I think I'm not a drag racing guy per se, but I think if I had to be trapped in a speeding car driving across America, I'd like to be with Gary Selsey, because I don't think there's a better character in the world than Gary Selsey.
Yeah, for sure. He's such a great guy, and I love the fact that he's one of those guys. He likes to blend in, but he's a big jokester. And I have a mental image of him at the Chili Bowl when you're doing a kick it tournament, and he had this string tank top on. I mean, it looked like body paint, but he didn't care. You know, he's out there yucking it up and raising money, and it's like, that guy's cool, you know, because he doesn't have to be that way.
No, Tony, it's a very uncertain time in the world right now. I mean, we're both sitting in isolation effectively, which probably a few people had wished we'd done 20 years ago. But the one thing I'm certain of is that I'm grateful for the moments that I've had in this industry. If it all ended tomorrow, in whatever form I make that comment, I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I've had and the people I've worked with over the years. And, you know, every year I get to work with you and Krug and Mike and, you know, and guys like that I have enormous respect for and get that opportunity. And so right now, I think if I'm grateful of anything, it's my friends across the world and my family, my racing family, that make everything now. I don't look back and go, God, I wish I could do that again. I look back and go, how lucky was I?
Yeah, you know, that's a great point. Because if you think about, you know, our friends, you know, we're both pretty lucky to have friends all over the globe, right? It's not just in Australia or in Iowa. But yeah, you know, people accuse me of not always being a gracious person, but I think it's more about what you'd said earlier about being intense. But when it comes to being thankful for things, I'm super thankful to Archie Ergenbright, who kind of took me under his wing and taught me about sprint car racing, right? The first sprint car I ever drove, and it's up on this wall right here behind me, was his car at Knoxville in a hot lap session. I'm super, super thankful to Jack Herway. As I commented on your post last night, Jack, by all intents and purposes, luckily didn't end up being my father-in-law, but because I was pretty sweet on his daughter Melinda for a long time. And but Jack has become, he's not just a friend to me. He's such a key part of my life. And when he's at Knoxville, you could ask him, there's not a time goes by I don't offer for him to come up and announce, because for me to hear him on the PA is just, it's so awesome. It reminds me of my childhood, right? But then, you know, I think about Cappy and the things that I learned from Cappy. You know, he didn't have to give me a chance. He could have told me to pound the bricks. He always called me Anthony. And, you know, I can't think of one or two times he ever called me Tony. He always called me Anthony, you know, with that gruffly voice of his. And, but what I'm so appreciative about him is, he gave me a chance. He told me when I screwed up. He told me when I did good, but it was so genuine. You know, it wasn't like over the top. And I learned a lot of life lessons from him, watching him deal with race car drivers and disgruntled fans and things like that. So, like I told you, I'm the luckiest guy that walks through the gates at Knoxville Raceway every week. I'll never win the Knoxville Nationals, but that's okay because I get to call them, right? So that's my win.
My favorite American holiday is Thanksgiving. We don't have it in Australia, but I wish we did. But I think right now the important thing, Tony, is that every day is Thanksgiving Day, because every day we need to take stock of the incredible people that we have around us. Life is not certain, particularly right now. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. As Doug Clark always tells me, tomorrow never comes. So what does that make tomorrow? I guess it makes it Friday, Doug. I'm trying to work out his ethos. Thanks, man. Really great to catch up with you. Please be safe and make sure you look after that incredible photo of you and I. It's going to be worth something one day.
Yeah, absolutely. This will go right back on the shelf here in just a second. I wanted to add one thing about Doug, because I would be remiss if I didn't. I'm so glad that he got to go to Australia, because I honestly, in my heart, I remember when I first started, he talked about wanting to do the NASCAR trucks when the trucks first started and didn't get to. And he, like all of us, you have aspirations to want to be the best and do the best. And I've always thought NASCAR missed the boat. They could have had the best flagman in the world. And so for him to come to Australia and get recognized the way you did it, I'm so happy for him that he got that, and because he deserved it. He earned it. He earned the respect. And so anyway, I'm thankful that you did that for him and Justin. And it's now we just need to get this, as I call it, Miss Rona or Corona. We need to get this out of the way so we can start racing again.
Be safe, mate. It's good to talk to you.
Good to see you, Wade. Thanks, buddy.
Were you waving at me then, or was it this one, or was it? I'll see you next time.
How do the kids do it? How do your boys do it? Is it like this?
You're so gangster, Bokhoven. Anthony, I'll catch you soon, okay?
All right. Thanks, Plato.
See you, buddy. Anthony, that's going to stick.